In the 1950s and 60s, the United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a race to see who could be the first to send a man into space. The Cold War was in full swing, and both countries wanted to dominate the final frontier. Both countries worked on rocket designs and support systems that would allow them to send a cosmonaut or astronaut into Earth's orbit and return them safely home. And both countries used animals to test the safety of their designs. Sadly, many of those history-making animals never made it home. The courage and sacrifice of the US and Soviet space animals is history that deserves to be remembered. One of the United States' first animals in space was a 1-pound squirrel monkey named Old Reliable because of how quickly he picked up on training at the Navy's Aviation Medical School in Pensacola, Florida. The US chose squirrel monkeys because of how sensitive they are to their environment, making their biological responses to the stresses of being in space easy to monitor. Before the Jupiter AM-13, bearing Old Reliable's capsule, blasted off at Cape Canaveral on Friday, December 13, 1958 at 3:38 in the morning, the scientists renamed the monkey Gordo, which was an easier name to pronounce over radio communications. He was equipped with a plastic leather-lined helmet, strapped to a custom-built couch with medical monitoring equipment. Gordo survived 9 minutes in space, but was lost when his capsule splash landed in the ocean, and the beacon to signal the waiting rescue ship did not go off. Despite the loss, the mission was considered a success. Scientists believe, despite not being able to find him, that Gordo survived the landing, and that a human could have done the same. Numerous monkeys and apes of several species were flown by the US in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. About 2/3 of all the monkeys launched in the 1940s and 50s died on the missions, or soon after landing. While the US was primarily working with monkeys in their space program, the USSR had a different animal of choice: dogs. The Soviet space program utilized all-female dogs because they were believed to be easier to handle. They used animals picked up as strays from Moscow streets because they thought that those animals could bear hunger and extreme temperatures more easily than house pets. The Soviets were launching suborbital flights with dogs inside them as early as 1951. Using R-1 rockets, pups with names like Dezig, Sigan, Malishka, and Zib successfully ventured into the upper atmosphere, and most returned to tell the tale. Zib was particularly interesting. Usually Soviet space dogs received extensive conditioning and training before being launched. But Zib was picked up off the streets because a dog named Bolik, who had been trained, managed to escape and run away shortly before her flight. Zib is actually an acronym for the Soviet words for replacement for missing Bolik. Despite receiving virtually no training, Zib completed her mission and returned safely home. Another Soviet dog made history by becoming the first animal to orbit the Earth, a 13-pound stray named Laika. Originally called Kudryavka, or Little Curly, the international press gave her the name Laika, or Barker, after her introduction by Russian radio to the adoring public, in which she barked into the microphone. After the successful launch of the first satellite in space, Sputnik, on October 4, 1957, Soviet scientists were tasked with creating a satellite to carry a dog into space. Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev requested that the next history-making satellite blast off on the anniversary of the Russian Revolution, which was November 7th. With this tight deadline of less than a month's preparation, scientists were pressed for time on designing Sputnik 2. Chosen partly because her white fur with dark spots reproduced well in black and white photos, Laika was extensively trained for her flight, along with a second dog named Albina, which translates roughly to Whitey, and another dog named Muka, or Little Fly. Muka was used to test the systems on the rocket, including life support. Albina was Laika's backup in case anything went wrong. Though Albina may have been a better candidate for the flight than Laika, because she'd already flown in a high-altitude rocket twice before. But Albina had a litter of puppies, and scientists were reluctant to send her on the mission. They already knew the dog they sent into space would not be coming home. The equipment to safely return a living creature from orbit had not been invented yet. The capsule would only be equipped with 1 day's worth of food because scientists weren't certain the dog would be able to eat it all. There were also concerns about weight. The first Sputnik, launched the month before, weighed about 40 pounds. Sputnik 2 would weigh an astonishing 250 pounds. Laika was outfitted with extensive biological monitoring instruments, through surgeries, and a special waste-eliminating suit created just for female dogs that took training for the animal to get accustomed to. She was kept in smaller and smaller boxes to prepare her for the restrictive space capsule and trained to sit calmly for a long time. Laika was also run through centrifugal simulations to prepare her body for the stresses of spaceflight. It must have been difficult for Russian scientists to send the famously even-tempered Laika off to her death. Adelia Kutaskaya, a scientist on the mission, said, "Before Laika's mission, I was crying. We all knew in advance that she would die. We were asking her to forgive us." Critics at the time protested the use of Laika. The National Canine Defense League in the United Kingdom asked all dog owners to participate in a minute of silence for Laika. Some animal lovers protested in front of Russian embassies. Before lunch, one of her handlers took Laika to his home, and his children spent a few hours playing with the dog before the flight. One of the people who prepared Laika for the flight later said that as she was strapped into the capsule, someone kissed Laika's nose and wished the dog bon voyage before shutting the door. Laika blasted off on November 3, 1957, in an R-7 rocket. After surviving the unbelievable gravitational pull of takeoff and making it to orbit, the jubilant Soviet scientists sent the message, "Alive! Victory!" to authorities for distribution through the press. At the time, the official story circulated suggested Laika was alive for a few days in orbit and had died a painless, pre-planned death. It was not until 2002 that scientists shared with the world that she probably died from the heat and stress, only a few hours after the flight began. Laika's capsule orbited the Earth over 2,500 times and burned up when it re-entered the Earth's atmosphere the following April. Skywatchers in the United States reported UFOs and bright lights. What they were seeing was Laika's return to Earth. Oleg Gazinko, one of the scientists to work with Laika, expressed dog lovers' opinions about her loss. He later said, "The more time passes, the more I am sorry about it. We did not learn enough from the mission to justify the death of the dog." Laika has been memorialized in popular culture, children's books, films, and stamps. In 2005, NASA named a soil target on Mars, part of the Mars Exploration Rover mission, Laika, because of her contribution and sacrifice for space travel and humanity. It would be almost 3 years since the flight of Laika and Sputnik 2 before the Soviet Union's Institute of Aviation and Space Medicine would again send dogs into space. The dogs on the next flight were named Belka and Strelka, and they would not be going alone. Soviet scientists also sent rats, mice, a rabbit, fruit flies, and plants with them. The primary aim of the mission was to gather intelligence regarding the physiological effects of space flight, information that would be used to determine whether or not short-term exposure to weightlessness seriously impacted basic bodily functions. Belka, which translates to squirrel, and Strelka, little arrow, were small, like Laika, but unlike their unfortunate colleague, their capsule was equipped with parachutes. Cameras were installed in the capsule to record their every move. When Sputnik 5 reached orbit, neither of the dogs were moving. However, after the 4th time around the Earth, Belka vomited, and both dogs began to move and bark. After they circled the Earth 17 times, the successful pair returned to Earth and became almost instant celebrities. The taxidermied pair may be viewed at the Museum of Cosmonautics in Moscow. A year after the flight of Belka and Strelka, Yuri Gagarin became the first human to orbit the Earth. Shortly before he did, a dog was sent into orbit along with a dummy shaped like a cosmonaut. Gagarin was said to have joked that he was unsure if he was the first man in space or the last dog. The Soviet dogs continued to make history when Ugolyak, Kol, and Vetorok, Light Breeze, orbited the Earth for 22 days in 1966. Their length of time in orbit was not beaten by humans until the Soyuz 11 mission in 1971, and is still a record for canines in space. And while animals in space offered valuable information that was necessary in order to facilitate manned spaceflight, they also made a unique connection at a critical time back here on Earth. Though the US and Russia were heavily engaged in the Cold War, President John F. Kennedy and Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev knew each other well and often exchanged gifts. One of the most interesting of the gifts was a small white dog named Pushinka. Listed as non-breed on her registration, Pushinka had an extraordinary parentage. Her mother, Strelka, was one of the first dogs the Soviets sent into space. The flights of the Soviet dogs had captured the US and the world's imagination, and in a story related to the BBC by her daughter Carolyn, when First Lady Jackie Kennedy ran out of things to say while seated next to Khrushchev at a state dinner in Vienna, she asked about Strelka's puppies, to which the dog had given birth after her famous flight. A few months later, Khrushchev sent Pushinka, the daughter of Strelka, to the White House. According to Carolyn, "My father had no idea where the dog came from and couldn't believe my mother had done that." By some reports, Pushinka had to be x-rayed and frisked for Soviet listening devices before being allowed into the White House. Pushinka became a favorite of the Kennedys' children and also one of the Kennedys' dogs, going on to have a litter of puppies with the Kennedys' Welsh Terrier named Charlie. The puppies were named Butterfly, White Tips, Blackie, and Streaker, and Kennedy reportedly referred to them as Pupniks. The puppies were given to 4 families in the United States after nearly 5,000 letters arrived at the White House requesting the dogs. About a year after the arrival of Pushinka, the Cuban Missile Crisis, one of the defining events of the Cold War, took place. Historian Martin Sandler argued in his 2013 book, The Letters of John F. Kennedy, that Pushinka and the relationship between Kennedy and Khrushchev helped prevent nuclear war. Animal testing of any kind has always been controversial, and I suppose it's no surprise that at a period of extreme competition between nuclear powers that our animal friends would be drawn into the fray. These creatures couldn't defend themselves. They didn't volunteer for missions that had to be, frankly, confusing, painful, terrifying, and for many of them, fatal. But as they always have, man's best friend came with us, even on our most daring missions. And it is no surprise that they also help to bring us together in our darkest hour. I can't help but think that when humankind finally goes out to distant planets, that we won't bring our canine companions with us, and we will settle the stars together. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The History Guy, short snippets of forgotten history between 10 and 15 minutes long, and if you did enjoy, please go ahead and click that thumbs up button. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions for future episodes, please write those in the comment section. I will be happy to personally respond. Be sure to follow The History Guy on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and check out our merchandise on teespring.com. And if you'd like more episodes on forgotten history, all you need to do is subscribe.